Today, we're diving into one of the most compelling figures of all time, Napoleon Bonaparte. For more than 200 years, this has been the big question, right? Was he a hero who spread the ideals of the French Revolution across Europe? Or was he a tyrant, a warmonger, who just plunged the entire continent into chaos? And trust me, the answer is way more complicated than you might think. So, just to give you an idea of how famous this guy still is, get a load of this number. Nearly 2 million euros. In 2023, that's what somebody paid for one of his famous two-cornered hats at an auction. That's an insane amount of money for a hat, right? It just shows you the power of his legend. So how did a man from a small, overlooked island become that legendary?
Well, Napoleon's story doesn't kick off in some fancy Parisian palace. Nope. It starts on the rugged island of Corsica. And that place, it shaped everything about him.
He came from a family that had a noble title but not a lot of cash. So when he got to the French military academy, you can just imagine it. He was a total outsider. The other kids made fun of his accent, his background, but that didn't break him. It just lit a fire under him. So what does he do? He buries himself in books, studying military tactics, reading history, and getting ready for a future that probably only he could see.
And his climb, wow, it was just unbelievably fast. He used the total chaos of the French Revolution as his personal ladder. One minute, he's a sharp artillery officer making a name for himself. The next, he's a national hero. And then, bam! In 1799, he pulls off a coup, grabs power, and basically names himself the most powerful man in France, the first consul.
But, being first consul just wasn't going to cut it for a guy with this kind of ambition. He was aiming for the top spot, to go from a revolutionary general to the absolute ruler of a brand new French empire.
Okay, so get this moment. This just shows you the sheer nerve of the man. We're in the famous Notre Dame Cathedral. The Pope is there to do the crowning, as tradition demands. But Napoleon? He doesn't wait. He takes the crown from the Pope and puts it on his own head. The message couldn't be clearer. My power doesn't come from God. It comes from me.
And let's be real, the foundation of this whole empire? It was built on the battlefield. His name basically became another word for military genius. The guy completely changed how wars were fought with strategies that are, believe it or not, still studied in military academies today. And when people talk about his military genius, Austerlitz is the example. It's his masterpiece. He's up against the emperors of both Austria and Russia, and he's outnumbered. But he uses this brilliant strategy to trick them, to lure them right into a trap. The victory was so total, it just shattered the alliance against him and made him the undisputed master of Europe.
But here's the crazy part. For all these incredible victories on the battlefield, Napoleon himself thought his greatest achievement had nothing to do with cannons or soldiers. He argued his real glory, the thing that would last, was something else entirely. He was talking about this, the Napoleonic Code. See, before him, French law was just this chaotic, ancient mess. He cleaned it all up, creating one single set of laws based on logic and reason. It guaranteed things like equality for all men before the law and religious freedom. It was a game changer, and countries all over the world started copying it. But, and this is the classic Napoleon contradiction, this modern code also rolled back a lot of rights for women, putting them under their husband's control. A genius and a chauvinist, all in one.
So at this point, Napoleon is on top of the world. He's the master of Europe. And then he makes a huge mistake. A decision born from pure arrogance. He decides to invade Russia. I mean, just look at this number to get a sense of how big this gamble was. Over 600,000 soldiers. It was the largest European army ever seen. He marched them all towards Moscow, expecting a quick knockout blow. Boy, was he wrong. That big, glorious battle he was expecting, it never happened. The Russians just kept retreating, burning everything as they went. By the time Napoleon got to Moscow, the city itself was on fire. With the brutal Russian winter setting in, he had no choice but to turn back. And that retreat, it turned into one of the worst disasters in all of military history. A total nightmare of blizzards, starvation, and constant attacks. His legendary army just fell apart in the snow. And the human cost, it's just staggering. Of those more than 600,000 men who marched in, fewer than 100,000 managed to stumble out. It was a blow that his empire would never, ever recover from. Yeah, that disaster in Russia, that was the beginning of the end. All of his enemies could smell blood in the water, and they all ganged up on him at once. At the Battle of Leipzig, often called the Battle of the Nations, they finally had him cornered. And just look at the numbers here. They pretty much tell the whole story. He was outnumbered more than 2-to-1 in men and cannons. It was a brutal, crushing defeat, and it spelled the end for his empire.
With his army in tatters and his enemies marching on Paris, he had nowhere to go. He gave up the throne and was shipped off to a tiny island called Elba. And just like that, it was over. The great Napoleon was exiled. Europe breathes a sigh of relief, or so they thought.
Incredibly, he escapes from Elba, lands back in France, and raises a whole new army. It's called the 100 Days. But his last roll of the dice came at a place called Waterloo. And it's just amazing when you put these two battles side by side. Austerlitz was his absolute peak, the work of a master. Waterloo, that was the bloody final nail in the coffin.
So, after Waterloo, that was it. No more comebacks. He was exiled again, this time to a remote rock in the middle of the Atlantic, where he died. But even though the man was gone, his impact on the world, well, that was just getting started.
I mean, his legacy is just one big contradiction, isn't it? He revolutionized warfare. As his armies marched across Europe, they spread ideas about equality and liberty. But funnily enough, by conquering everyone, he also sparked the idea of nationalism. People started defining themselves against him. And his famous legal code modernized the world, but also set women's rights back. He was a creator and a destroyer, all at the same time.
And you know what? In the end, Napoleon himself seemed to know what would really last. Looking back on his life, he basically said, "My real glory isn't winning all those battles. Waterloo will wipe those memories away. But the one thing that will last forever is my civil code." He knew ideas could outlive armies.
So that brings us right back to where we started. Was this guy a visionary who dragged Europe into the modern age? Or was he a tyrant whose ambition left millions dead? The thing is, when you look at all of it, the only possible answer is that he was both. And that's what makes him so fascinating. His contradictions didn't just define his time, they're still shaping ours.